Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new edition of Low-Code Cafe, episode 77. Today, we'll be continuing the topic that we started last week with event-driven design patterns in low-code. And today, there will go much further than last time. But before that, let's welcome the new people to this event. This is happening every week at the same day, same hour. It's a community event where the community, we get together to showcase product updates, support updates, so lessons that we learn on our support channels. And the biggest chunk is going deep into a technique, a pattern, building application from scratch. So it's very hands-on. This constitutes a very, very good source of training videos. So if you haven't done it already, head to our YouTube channel, subscribe to notifications, because there are already 76 hours of training, very good training content out there, plus other videos that you'll find on our YouTube channel for training besides this webinar. Good. So the agenda for today, my name is Bogdan Litescu. I'm the founder and CEO of Plant an App, and I will be giving you the product updates, after which we'll have Dale Warner, our head of support, give us the stories from the trenches, so lessons that we learn on our support channels. And finally, Dale will continue with the event-driven design session from last week. Good. So this week we published 3 new hotfixes in the 1.18 release. And these hotfixes are related, the first one, to the dashboard. So in the dashboard, in the where conditions, we are not supporting tokens. So right now it's possible to use the query string tokens as well. So this opens up a new array of possibilities in terms of having dynamic cards, for example, in dashboards. The other thing that we solved, there are these options to replace tokens and decode HTML inside when you define a token, and they were not retaining their values. So this has been addressed as well. And then finally, we did a change. So probably this is not so much as a bug fix, because we changed the behavior of the scheduler module. So now a portal is always required for a scheduled job. We did an analysis, and we assessed that there is no risk in always running the job under a portal rather than running outside of a portal context. So with these 3 fixes that are already available in your Plant an App instances, so you'll see them in the updates tab. We are up to 19 hotfixes in total in this release. And I know it sounds scary. It doesn't mean that we had more bugs than usual or more fixes. It just means that we are able to release more hotfixes ahead of the next release. So this means that people can get them much earlier than waiting for 1.19, which is still a couple of weeks away. Good. Then moving on to the next release, 1.19. So we changed the scope a bit. Initially, we aimed to make Bootstrap 5 be the default template for 1.19. And right now we reduced the scope a bit. We call it experimental. So it's still, it works, it's stable in many cases, it works well, but it just doesn't have all the features and all the, let's say, configuration implemented or tested out. We optimized for making the entity pages, so the pages that we generate automatically, to work well with Bootstrap 5. It's also possible to use, let's say, forms and grids with Bootstrap 5 templates on custom pages. But again, they will not have all the functionalities that the legacy views have it. So we'll complete this in 1.20. So 1.20 in 1.19 we'll play it safe. So Bootstrap 3 will still be the default for everything, and then in 1.20 we'll switch. We'll make Bootstrap 5 be the default. But of course, we need your help, your input on the new UI, on the new Bootstrap 5 UI. It's a lot of changes. We touch, I think, a couple of hundred files at least. So if you haven't done already, we have a beta program. So we'd greatly appreciate you getting involved, helping us test all these scenarios that we know customers have out there. In terms of the dates, we are pushing it for 1 week just to get everything nailed down and stable. So the beta was supposed to be this Friday, but we'll move it for the next Friday. And then the final release will happen on February 14th. So that's about everything on my end. And then unless there are questions, I would like to invite Dale to take over.
All right, hello. Yes, with that, let's see, I have just put some things on the chat, some things that we'll talk about in this episode, but it's some of our normal things, our webinar feedback form, the link to register for Low-Code Campfire, which is more of a discussion format rather than a webinar format, which happens every Friday, and link again to our YouTube channel. So let's see, Bogdan mentioned the hotfixes and that they're coming, and I'm mentioning them too. And I guess what I'll talk about from a support standpoint is how to apply them and what's coming up. If you go into the configuration and go to the updates section, hotfixes. So I've navigated over to the hotfix tab. You can see all the hotfixes, and these are all indicated as bug fixes, and you can see that there are a number of them. I think it's a great improvement in the way that we're doing things, that we're able to move these smaller things, many of them, whether it's one or two of you or more, are waiting for, and you're able to just install them as a hotfix. But from a technical things that you should look at, things to make your life easier, we're working on adding an apply all button in the hotfix area, because these are all installed individually. But if at this point you can only choose to install them individually. But what I wanted to point out, for example, is that when there's a number of updates to a number of to the same area. So for example, the token builder had a bug fix, had 4 different bug fixes here. If you installed this first one that's listed, it will just fix that one element. If you install the last one, it will install all 4 of them at once. And that's not really obvious in the way that we do things, with the way that we have them listed here. But if you want to take all the bug fixes, my advice then is to pick the last one, the one with the highest number in that area. So this one will install all 4 things. I'm going to just go ahead and install it now, just so that you can see it work. But this gets into the way that we do the work. We do a bug fix, then we move on to the next thing. And when the same thing happens, when other bugs are repaired in the same area, we generate a new build for it, and it shows up. That one item shows up more than once, but installing the highest version catches all of the earlier ones. So that's and yes, yeah. Thanks, Jerry. You're correct. You're just ahead of me by a couple of seconds. Yes, there will be a one-click hotfix install all. So we're going in that direction. So having gone through that, now you can see that all the tokens items have been installed. And so in the same way, there's 4 different things for form builder, and we could install that there. So that's just a save you a few seconds kind of a tip from our bug fixes. And so that's it for that. That's from the trenches segment today. So I'm going to close that out. and move directly on into hands-on low coding. So last time we talked about event-driven architecture and talked about the benefits of flexibility, reusability, being able to split responsibility between form designers and specialists. It becomes especially important to do this technique when you have the larger the system, the more that you should consider it, especially if you have split system or inter-system communication that's necessary. So if you are just starting on this particular, if you're watching this after the fact and seeing part 2, heavily recommend that you go back to part 1, and it shows how this architecture is set up and how it's really more about how it's consumed. Today, the challenge is that we're going to actually install install this architecture on a system. And before we get into that, I wanted to talk about some changes from last time, which is having to do with Payload. So if we go, this is the design site from last time, and if we look in the event-driven messages, there was always a Payload segment that we didn't use, but now I have enhanced the system so that when you do a new client event, a CRM new client event, I'm passing the payload, which is all the information about the client, and it's in a JSON format. And that means that anything that's downstream that's consuming this event knows not only that the event happened, but any of the details that the event creator, in this case, the new client ad form, decided to share. And so it's then not necessarily their responsibility to have to look it up against the client ID and have access to all that information. We don't have to share all the information, but we are sharing it. So to see what that looks like, then if we were to go to the CRM system and look at clients, and one of the things that we did is added a resend button. So if I resend for client B, that triggers the logic necessary to raise the event. And so now if we look at the event messages, we can see that I've just now raised the new client event for client number 2 and all the data in JSON. If we were to take this out and take a look at it, have my favorite beautifier here, and then paste this in and take a look at it. I've chosen to put in the client information and then also the account rep information, so that if anything downstream wanted to communicate with the account rep, these are the things that I thought might be relevant, and so I've added that. So that's the change since last time. And so that's part of it, because when we go into our system today, what we're going to do is build it from scratch, and then we're going to transmit the events from this system into the system that we just install it into. So that will show the inter-system communication capability. So the first thing, I just wanted to kind of show you how I think and work, and I don't know that it's a best practice, but it is how I designed the system. And then we will build the event-driven architecture into the Campfire website, chose that system so that it is available to anybody who joins the Low-Code Campfire. And so you'll be able to see all the parts and pieces and get into it and play with how it works. And then we're going to communicate events again from the our make-believe client system or CRM system into the Campfire, just in case Campfire wants to respond to it. And then time permitting, and I don't think we're going to get to this, we could build some events on the Campfire system where it responds to another the original event. But I don't think we'll get there today. It's a lot to cover. So yes, the design document. So This is what I did when I decided to do when I got assigned to do event-driven architecture. I went and I've got my resources here, the Wikipedia article, and I based it on all the different things that I based it on. But then what did I do? I thought, well, I'm going to need a page for this. I'm going to need some entities, and then I put the field names. So this then is the kind of the data structure for what I decided to implement, and we worked through it. This is just an area where I thought through what I needed to do in the data, and then from a putting some life into the data, I came up with a couple of workflows that I thought I would need, and the two workflows are, hey, this event has occurred, so let's process that. And so we need all the name of the event, the primary ID, the payload, things like this. This is what that workflow is going to need. And then the process is that it's going to create an event and it'll return an ID as an output. So that was one workflow, and we'll be covering that in depth. We're going to be building it out. And then the other was a processing engine to say, well, for every event that gets raised, how do we get the event to process, find all the subscribers and raise the event? So that'll be the processing engine. And so I looked again at the same way. What are the inputs? What's the processing? What are the outputs? In this case, there are no outputs. I also thought about how this is going to be used, and this is kind of the area that we covered last week, the responding workflow. Today, we'll also be doing this event message processing. It's automation that says every time there's an event, run the processing. Just a very simple automation job, but it's one that puts everything into motion. And then finally, I said, I need an API that is going to be used if something else wants to let me know that an event has occurred. So if you have some other system, this is the API that they can use to call and say, hey, I need you to react to this. So this was my design document. And again, it just covers all the different components that I thought I was going to need. And I built this before I start building the actual content, and then it makes building the content easier. So when we get into doing this, I will also share this proof of concept document just to kind of make it easier for you to follow along. But I'm going to close that out for now. And so getting to actually building something. We're going to go to our Campfire site, and we're going to add a page for event-driven architecture, and then start doing those things that were listed on the design document. We're going to create 3 entities, start building some workflows, and just continue working through it. So I'm going to jump back and forth between this page and the work, and hopefully it doesn't get too confusing about where we are. So we have the Campfire website brought up, and let's see, hopefully I'm already logged in. I am, so I'm going to go to configuration, and we're going to start in entities. Now, as I've mentioned before, I'm a big fan of copy and pasting in this so that I can try and keep from making crazy mistakes. So I've got that going on my other screen. So the first thing that we're going to do is EDA event messages. This is an entity we're going to create. So we'll go into the site, add a new item, and we don't have an EDA namespace. I like to have a namespace. So we'll add a namespace, and this is going to be EDA, and it's for the namespace allows us to easily see components that are related to that when we go looking for them. So we're going to select this namespace, and we're going to create the EDA event messages entity. And I already got out of order. So I'll fix that. I didn't add an EDA page. So we'll go to pages, and add a page. This is, I'm going to put it at the top level just to make it easy to find, but this is probably something you would hide. So this is just going to be to our developer population, and they will also have the ability to edit it. So we have now we have a page, and if we go look at the preview of our site, we see we now have an EDA page. Okay. So entities, we are creating a new entity. It's in the EDA namespace. It is an EDA event message or EDA event messages, and the page is EDA. In addition to the system properties, we are going to have properties like name, payload, raised by, name, and entity ID. Now, these were all determined, again, I grabbed them, they came from my design document as I was thinking about them. I'm going to allow the payload to be large text so that we can send a lot of information if we need it, but everything else is going to be text, and we'll make name be the display name. It's a great time to figure out what things you want to allow to be searchable. So I'm going to allow the payload and the raised by to be searchable. We can allow these entity name and entity ID to be filterable. All these make sense to be that. And in the same way, we can make some things be sortable. And in this case, so that's the setup for entities. In terms of permissions, users are not going to be creating records or directly creating records in here. So we're not going to, let's see, they will need to be able to add records. So I'm going to do that. I hadn't actually tested this out as a user, just as a low-code engineer, which is one of the things that are one of the steps that you need to add as a regular step. Sign in as a regular user and make sure you can do the things. So I'm sure I'm going to need that. So that is the first entity, and we'll let that create. And so if we refresh, our EDA now has EDA event messages. It's already built and ready to store messages. The next one that we want to do is event subscribers. Now, again, this comes from our design document. We will do a new EDA entity that is going to be called event subscriber, subscribers, parent page EDA. And this is going to have information like so the name is going to be the name of the event that it's going to respond to. Again, this is the subscription. So this is registering something that's going to respond to an event. So it's going to respond to the event called name. The subscriber token is the magic, the secret sauce that token gets evaluated and runs workflows and all. And we covered that last week. The description of the response, we're going to also allow that to be a large text. So this is just going to be a description of what we expect to be going on there. The priority is a numeric priority. If there are, let's see, this is an integer number. So if there are multiple subscriptions for one event, that they happen in order from highest to lowest priority. And the status is a text value, that it's a stat saying whether or not the subscription is active, so you can turn them on and off. And so we'll make some things. Let's see, the name is going to be the display name, and we'll make them a few things filterable, and everything sortable. Now these are not going to require any particular permission because these are added by the system. So not going to be an issue there. So we'll save that and refresh and take a look at what we have. So now we have another thing under here, event subscribers. And so our entity page and the ability to view that is all built out. Cool, we're blowing through these entities. It's next one is going to be the subscriber response. So this record is all about, for each subscriber, a subscriber response gets created. And so it's just providing a nice record of what got done in response to that event having been raised. We're going to still connect it to the EDA page, and we'll go on to the properties. This includes things like status, so the status is just going to be a text value. It's going to start out with one value. You'll see us set it here in a little bit. And then when it gets completed, it'll be success. If an error happens, it'll be error. But this is going to be a quick way of seeing what things worked and what didn't work. The event message ID is mapped to a particular event message. And this allows us to link, it automatically links back to the message it came from, and the event subscriber. This is an entity of EDA event subscriber, so that says that a particular event and subscriber got processed, and this is the record of that. And then the text will also allow that to be large text so that the response to a particular event can be as long as it needs to be. The status is going to be our display here, and we're going to make things searchable and filterable and sortable. And these, again, these responses are created by the system, so we're not going to need any permissions to do that. Refresh one more time. So now we have EDA event subscriber responses. So messages will get raised, or events will get raised. The subscribers will be used to figure out how we're going to respond, and the subscriber responses are the thing that what happens for each subscription on each message. Okay, isn't that fun? Flipping back to where are we? We've done our entities, our 3 entities that we needed, and then the workflows. So the 2 workflows we're going to do is how does somebody say that an event has occurred, and how are they going to get processed? So we will start with that an EDA event has occurred. And so we'll go back into our configuration and look at workflows, and we're going to create a new workflow that is, again, in the same namespace. And we'll give it the name. It's EDA event has occurred. And the inputs of this are that we have the name of event, the primary entity name, the primary entity ID, the payload, if any, and raised by. So the payload we saw it earlier, it could be a large text, so we want to be able to accept it as a large text. So the idea here is that when anybody wants to raise an event, anybody can raise an event. Might not be responded to, but you have to pass the name of the event that you're passing in, some kind of, you might want to pass in a primary ID, an entity ID, or a payload. And typically you'll say who raised this event. So that's the inputs. So let's move on to the process. And the process is really pretty straightforward. The main thing we want to do, in this case, the only thing we're going to do, is new EDA event message. And so we're just going to create a message, and it's going to have the values, the same thing that we pasted up here a minute ago. So I'm using my Windows clipboard, and going to be able to use the same inputs, but they're the same things that come from the input side. So we're getting the name of event, value, putting it in brackets so that we get the value, and the payload is called payload raised by. Output that we're going to do is we're going to send our, we're going to get back from this an event message ID, and we're going to pass this out so that whoever calls this can know what event got raised as a result. So we will save that, and that is all. We are going to say we're done. And our output then is the event message ID, and we're sending back the event message ID that we just recorded. So pretty simple workflow. Let's give it a test. We really just want to see that this works. So we're going to use this interactive save and test to raise an event. Its name is going to be test1. We have an entity name. Well, let's give it something worthwhile. Invoice 1234. Payload C raised by D. We're just testing to see if everything is wired correctly. So we run it. It gives us an event message ID, number 1. And so if we go to our front end and look at messages, hopefully we'll see that an event has been raised. Its ID is 1. That's what it told us. Has the name and the payload and the raised by. The entity name was invoice, entity ID is 1234. So it's wired correctly. It does raise the event. It's test data, so I'm going to get rid of it, but at least we know it's working. So again, EDA event has occurred. The idea is that anything throughout your system can now call this common workflow and say, this thing has happened. Last week we used CRM, new client created. This could be CRM, new invoice created, CRM, new history recorded. Any event that you want to raise can be raised. And then the rest of this has to do with how we're going to respond to it. So that is, we've done EDA event has occurred. So now we're going to go into the EDA processing engine. So that is a new workflow. Back. Paste the name, EDA processing engine. And this is, let's describe it. This is, we're going to trigger processing. So what are our inputs? Well, we only have one input for this. We're going to process an event event message. And so we'll add it here. It is a type of, it is an entity of EDA event message. So by selecting that as an input, now every event message as a prefix will return all of the fields that are part of an EDA event message, the ID, the name, the payload. So we get access to all that kind of automatically. So we have our event message. And now what does our processing look like? Well, the first thing that we need to do is to find the subscribers who subscribed to this message so that we can raise those, process those subscriptions. So we'll go get a list of those. That is we're going to read all active event subscribers, read event subscribers. So this is the step we're going to do. We'll get all the subscribers. We're going to read them in order so that we process them in order. And the record ID we want, this is the wrong action. So we want to read all. So I got the wrong one. So let's try again. Read all EDA event subscribers. Let's try that again for the name of the event. So the where clause that we're going to use is the name will be equal to something. And the something is this event message name. So I'm going to copy that and say that it's equal to the event message name. But we also want only the subscriptions that are active. So we'll say and status equal. So any other status is going to get ignored, so that's cool. We're going to order it by the priority column. So we'll do priority 9 first and priority 1 last. It may or may not make a difference, but it at least gives the low-code developer the choice of which things happen first. The output token of this is going to be subscribers. And so let's see how we're going to use that. From a formatting perspective, that comment was a little long. We open this up a little bit, it makes it a little nicer to read. So the next thing that we want to do is to create a subscriber list. We're going to create a list. So, and we're going to create it from JSON. So create a list from JSON. So why are we doing that? Or how are we going to do that? This tells us that when we create subscribers, you can reference it as whatever the token name is. So output token of subscribers, :JSON. So that's what we're going to use here. We're going to create a list from that JSON. So the JSON model is JSON. And the list that we're going to create is subscribers list. And I like, as a matter of programming, to put the name up here in the title so that I can see what I'm creating. Create list from JSON, and it's creating the subscriber list. And that's all we need to do here. So as we look at the block, we can see that we're creating the subscribers list. So we read all the subscribers, we've turned it into a list, and now we want to loop through that list, which is a for each kind of action. So we will add actions for each list entry. The list that we're processing is subscribers list. And again, that's just for cosmetic, but we'll put it up at the top. And then we'll also put it here. So we're processing the subscribers list. So this is going to loop through each one and allow us to do something. In our case, we want to process those tokens, plus deal with the response record. So we will process through that, and here are the actions that we're going to take. The first one is that over here in subscriber responses, there aren't anything. This is going to be the record of what happened. So we're going to want to create a subscriber response record each time. So that will be our first action. Create a subscriber response, and we're going to pass it some stuff here. The thing that we're going to create it with the status of notified. So the idea is we're kind of creating a place for however this response, whatever this response does, it's expected to, at the end of it, update that, update the status to say it was complete, and say what it did. So the message ID that it's related to is our, again, coming from our input, the event message ID. And then we're looping through the subscribers list, and the subscriber list then that we're connected to, the ID is the subscribers list ID. We're not going to give it a message, but the output token is going to be the subscriber response ID, which we're going to use in a minute. So I'll put that on my clipboard. So that's the first action that we want to do. It's just a place to record that. The next action is that we're going to evaluate a token. So this is a token. So we're going to create our update token, and we want to evaluate the subscriber token. So when I'm going to flip back to this work we did last week to see how this subscriber record comes to us. It comes to us, it's connected to an event, and we actually pass it the value, a token, and that this is the token that gets evaluated. And so whatever this token does might be connected to a workflow, might be connected to a Razor script or a database, but whatever this token does, this is the token that gets evaluated, and so the work will get done, however it needs to be, however it needs to respond. So we're going to be processing the subscriber token. So that's what we're getting off of the record, and so we're going to create a result, which we're probably not going to use. And so coming from the same subscriber list, we use the subscriber token. That gets us, so this is, this right here, it's not really obvious, but this is where all the work takes place, because when that token gets evaluated, all the things that are connected to it happen. And so, and I'm going to add some recursions to this. So if this token has some extra values, it'll expand them one at a time until the full token gets evaluated. And so those are the only two steps necessary to, we've created a result place. Hopefully the token will update the response. And then the last thing that we're going to do is on error. What happens if things go wrong? And so we are going to add an event to partially update the EDA subscriber response. So this is wrong, and we want to update the, oops, too many brackets, the subscriber response ID. We the one that we created just above. We're going to update it, and we're going to say that the status is error. And when you're in error, you also have the exception message as a token that you can grab. So we're going to, whatever the error was, we're going to put that into the message of this. And so exception message will go there. So whatever went wrong, it'll leave some clues behind as far as what it did. Good. So now we have, this is all, so we got the list of things that needed to be done. We got the database, read the database for things to be done. We turned it into a list. We executed each token one at a time in order. And so now we end, and there are no outputs. So we are just going to save this. Yes, hit save. And so this gets us through to here. We've handled the events and we've handled the processing engine. So now we want the engine to be called every time there's a new event. So that's easy to do. We go into automation, and we're going to go create a new job that's going to be called EDA event message processing. I'm going to use my user to set the context, so that it will know, be able to create records according to, but you would give it a user that has rights. I happen to have rights here, so that's the reason I'm doing that. The trigger that we're doing is on database insert. Every time that something gets added to EDA event message, we want to process the message. So this is going to give us an ID. And so we are going to send that ID for processing. So we will add an action. And this action is execute the EDA processing engine. And we're going to send the ID of the message to process. And the ID is coming to us as ID. When this trigger runs, it's got all the fields of an EDA event message, which one of those is an ID. So it's sending us this ID. And so we save that job. That was easy to do. And we're going to do one last thing. And before I do, I'll just comment a little bit. Last week, I told you that I was going to go out of order. I showed you how to connect all these things, how all these things existed, and we connected and used them. And this half an hour of dry punching all this stuff in, if I'd done it last week, we would have been really bored to death. So let's work this last one, and then we'll see it work. So EDA event has occurred. This is the last one that we're going to do. This is an API. So let's EDA event has occurred. Let's copy and paste a little bit. Okay, so we're going to go to APIs, add a new API, and say that this is so some other system can call this API and say that any kind of an event has occurred, and it will work. So the comment then is allow a foreign system to raise an event. And now we need some input parameters. I am going to copy these and have them all ready to go. And so here we are. It takes a number of parameters, and they are the name of the event, an entity name, ID, payload, and erased by. All the things that we need in our common workflow that we created earlier, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to call the action called EDA event has occurred, and we're going to pass it all those same fields as values. Event, name, D, payload, raised by. And then we're going to get back from that workflow an event message ID, and we can send that back as a response. So we will add a response that is a new object as JSON. Code 200. We will add a property called event message ID and send back the event message ID that we just got. And that's our API. So let's save and test this out. We can raise any kind of event, and I'm going to just call it invoice. It's going to be an invoice number 4. Manual, so we'll send it. It gave us back an event message ID of 2 when we tested it. And so if we go look now, we can see that we have a, let's look at our messages and refresh. So by calling an API, it's called our workflow that created this, this event. So cool, that's it. So this is all the parts and pieces of our event-driven architecture, and it works. After this session is over, I'll go ahead and add in some subscriptions so that when you get into the Campfire website, you'll be able to see it work. But let's add something fun so that we can see the inter-system communication. So going back to the system that we were working on last week, if we were to go into the configuration of that system and we can add an automation job, I've already set, this is on this system, when an event gets raised, I've already built a job that says send it to the service desk, a different application. It's automatically raising that event. I think I'll just yep, this is easy to do. So let me copy this and get it up on my screen here. So let's just walk through what this looks like. We'll create a new one and say that we want to going from this LCC 75 website, and we're going to raise them on the Campfire website. So everything that happens on this site is also going to get sent to a remote system that it can react. And in the same way, I'm going to operate as this user. And what are we going to do? Well, we are going to do a database event. So every time, again, every time that we get an event message, we want to send that message on to someplace else. So we'll do that. And then the actions that we're going to do, we do that through a server request. So we do a server request. So where is the server request going to? If we go back to our API on our remote system, it's telling us the URL for the Campfire website is this. So that's where that's the URL we're going to need to use to send it to. And we are going to do a post because we called that a post method. And we got to send it some data. And in the interest of time, I'm going to fully copy and paste this from my existing job. But we're passing the name of event that comes from this inserted EDA event message. We're passing the name, the entity name, primary ID, payload, raised by. We're passing all that stuff to the remote API. And that's it. So we save the job. So let's see it at work. If we go to our Campfire site, I am going to look at the event messages, and we only have one, our test one. So let's we'll leave that there for the moment. And so now I'm going to go to our LCC 75 system and add a client. So we go to CRM clients, and we will add a new client. I'm going to copy and paste the email address to make this easy, but I'm going to add client D. And the email address includes client D, and I'm going to set myself as the account representative. So when that happened, our automation job failed. It failed because it didn't have some, I had a issue. Okay. Let's see if we can figure it out. Quickly. Oh, looks like I had a type error, so I'm going to have to sort that out. So here we did an hour's worth, and didn't actually get to see it work. I am going to disable that job and enable the other one. I'm sending these to the service desk, and so we'll do it here real quickly again. We had just hit the resend button on that, and if we go to my service desk application, I have the exact same event-driven architecture in that system. So if we look at EDA and the messages that come from that, we can see that we have client D gets created with all that nice payload that we can react to. So it's there, and by the time you get to it in Campfire, you'll be able to see all the parts and pieces. But that's the summary. We've made we've added the event-driven automation to Campfire, and the two systems can or will be able to talk to each other. And then all the benefits that we saw last week in the way that you can wire any number of events to any number of responses to any number of events, be able to realize those. So, Mr. Bogdan, do I get a D or an F today for not quite having finished?
Thanks, Dale. I think it's definitely one of the most technical sessions we had in this webinar, but I think it's a very good one, showing the extent to which you can go with Plant an App. So thanks everyone for being here. Next week in next Low-Code Cafe, we'll focus a lot on showcasing the new release 1.19. So looking forward to see you again next week, same day, same hour. Bye everyone.